At my son's wedding, my brother grabbed his CEO's arm, pointed at me and sneered, "This is my broke failure of a sister." I just smiled. The CEO, a man named Sterling Croft, looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, then he looked back at my brother. And in a voice that cut through the cheerful music like a shard of ice, he said, "Pack your desk. You're fired." The champagne glass in my mother's hand trembled. My brother's face, flushed with alcohol and arrogance just a moment before, turned a ghastly shade of white. In that frozen moment, as the joyous celebration around us warped into a tableau of shock, my smile didn't waver. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the calm, quiet smile of a chess master who had just said, "Checkmate," after a very, very long game. But for you to understand the chilling peace in that smile, you need to understand the 15-year war I'd been silently losing. My war began in a sterile lawyer's office 15 years ago, a place that smelled of old paper and stale grief. I was 49 now, but back then, at 34, I was a new widow, hollowed out by the sudden, brutal loss of my husband, Arthur. My son, Reese, was only 11. The world had become a gray, blurry landscape, and I was just trying to navigate it without falling apart. My older brother, Corbin, was there, dressed in a suit that cost more than my car, a somber expression plastered unconvincingly on his face. He always saw life as a performance, and grief was just another role to play. The lawyer, a kind man with tired eyes, had just finished explaining the terms of Arthur's life insurance policy. It was a respectable sum, enough to keep Reese and me afloat if I was careful. As soon as the lawyer left the room to fetch some documents, Corbin leaned forward, his polished shoes squeaking on the linoleum. He placed a heavy, patronizing hand on my arm. "Lenora," he began, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. "Let's be honest, you were always more of the creative type. Arthur handled the finances. Numbers are my world. Let me handle this for you, for Reese's sake." I looked into his eyes. I saw no concern, no brotherly love. I saw avarice, pure and simple. I saw a vulture circling, impatient for the kill. He saw me not as his grieving sister, but as an opportunity. A damsel in distress he could rescue while pocketing a handsome management fee, or worse, steering the funds into one of his own harebrained schemes. Arthur had always called Corbin's business ventures, all sizzle, no steak. I remember the feeling of cold clarity cutting through the fog of my grief. I gently removed his hand from my arm. "Thank you for the offer, Corbin," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'll be fine." His jaw tightened. "Don't be a fool, Lenora. You'll blow through it in a year." "That's my risk to take," I replied, turning my gaze back to the window. The argument was over, but a battle line had been drawn. The second exhibit in my Museum of Pain came a few years later. Christmas Eve, at our mother Marin's house. The house was filled with the scent of cinnamon and pine, a glittering tree stood in the corner, and the whole family was gathered. I had started to find my footing by then. Reese was thriving in school, and I was managing our budget meticulously. We weren't rich, but we were okay. This, for some reason, infuriated Corbin. He couldn't stand the idea of me being self-sufficient. That evening, his wife, a woman as shallow as a birdbath, made a great show of presenting me with a large hamper. In front of everyone, she announced, "We wanted to make sure you and Reese have something on the table this year, Lenora. We know things must be tight." I opened it. Inside was not a gourmet selection of cheeses and wine, but a collection of dented cans of soup, generic brand pasta, and a box of saltine crackers. Tucked inside was a crisp $100 bill. It was a performance of charity, a public declaration of my supposed poverty. It was designed to humiliate, to cast me as the family charity case. My cheeks burned. I saw my son Reese clench his fists at his sides. My mother just gave me a tight, pitying smile and said, "That was so thoughtful of you, Corbin. The final exhibit was a phone call, 7 years ago. By then, Corbin was climbing the corporate ladder at a fast-growing tech firm called Nexus Dynamics. He called me, his voice booming with false bonhomie. He didn't ask how I was. He launched directly into a monologue about a boat he wanted to buy, a sleek, obnoxious vessel he absolutely could not afford. The bank, it turned out, required a co-signer. For an hour, he tried to bully me into it. He listed imaginary favors he'd done. He brought up our dead father. He questioned my loyalty as a sister. He painted a picture of a life of luxury that I, too, could get a taste of if I just played along. I listened to the entire, exhausting tirade without interruption, doodling patterns on a notepad. I let him expend every ounce of his manipulative energy. When he finally wound down, sputtering about how this was the least I could do, there was a long pause. He thought he had worn me down. So? He asked, impatiently. I took a quiet breath. No. The silence on the other end of the line was electric. No? What do you mean, no? I mean no, Corbin. I will not be co-signing your loan. But, why? He stammered, utterly baffled. He couldn't comprehend being denied something he felt entitled to. I didn't give him a reason. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture. I just let the no hang in the air, a solid, immovable wall. The sputtering rage that followed was monumental before he slammed the phone down. That no cost me a year of icy silence from him, but it reinforced a critical lesson. My strength wasn't in arguing with him, but in refusing to play his game. You might wonder why I put up with it for so long. The answer, like most things in my life, traces back to Arthur. My husband was the family's heart. He was a brilliant, kind man who saw the wounded insecurity beneath Corbin's bluster. He was the buffer, the peacemaker, the one who could always get Corbin to back down with a quiet word or a well-timed joke. His dying wish, whispered to me in that sterile, beeping hospital room, was, "Don't let the family fall apart, Nora. Please." For 15 years, I held on to those words like a sacred text. I misinterpreted his plea for connection as a command for my submission. I thought that by absorbing Corbin's casual cruelty, by silently enduring the slights and the pity, I was honoring my husband. I was keeping the peace. I didn't realize I was just tending to a toxic garden, allowing the weeds to grow thicker and choke out everything else. So, I built myself a camouflage. I lived simply. My 15-year-old Subaru, which Corbin called my sad little tin can, ran perfectly. My small house, the one he'd urged me to sell, had a garden that produced the best tomatoes in the neighborhood. To my family, I was living on the fumes of Arthur's legacy. A quiet widow, obsessed with her garden and her books, a little eccentric, but ultimately, a harmless failure. This cover was my shield. It kept the questions at bay. It kept the requests for money, beyond the occasional loan from my Aunt Bryony that was never repaid, to a minimum. My life was my own, hidden in plain sight. I had my secrets, of course. My online book club, which met once a month via a secure video link, was where we discussed complex books on algorithmic market predictions. The members of this club didn't know me as Lenora Vance, the quiet gardener. They knew me as V001, the anonymous first investor of Nexus Dynamics. The books we discussed were acquisition targets and quarterly earnings reports. My quarterly trips to San Francisco weren't to visit an old college roommate. They were for in-person board meetings. Once, my son Reese saw my prep notes and asked what I was reading. Just a fascinating study on emergent economic behaviors, I'd said. He just smiled and replied, "Sounds like you, Mom." He didn't know the truth, not all of it, but he saw me. He always saw me. The day of the wedding was one of the few perfect days I have ever known. The sun shone brilliantly on the beautiful vineyard estate. My son, Reese, looked so much like his father in his sharp tuxedo, his eyes filled with a happiness so profound it made my heart ache with joy. His bride, Thea, was radiant. She was a brilliant journalist with a spine of steel and a kind heart, more than I could have ever hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Watching them exchange their vows, I felt Arthur's presence beside me, a warm and welcome ghost, and I knew he would be so proud. The bubble of perfect joy was pricked, as it always was, by the arrival of my brother. Corbin and his wife rolled up in a brand new, obscenely red Porsche, the engine roaring unnecessarily. He stepped out like he was on a red carpet, wearing a tailored suit and a diamond-encrusted watch that he made sure to flash at every opportunity. He strode through the guests, bestowing handshakes and hollow compliments. He finally made his way to me. He kissed the air next to my cheek. "It's amazing what they can do with polyester these days, sis," he said, flicking a piece of lint off my simple, elegant silk dress. "You clean up nice." It was his standard greeting, a compliment wrapped in an insult. I just smiled. "Hello, Corbin. I'm glad you could make it." The reception was held in a grand hall with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rolling hills. The atmosphere was magical. That is, until Reese brought a guest to our family's table. "Mom, Corbin," Reese said, his arm around a distinguished-looking man in his mid-50s. "I'd like you to meet Sterling Croft. He's been a great mentor to me, and a good friend." Corbin, who had been loudly telling a story about closing a deal in Singapore, stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened. I knew he recognized the name instantly. Sterling Croft was the celebrated CEO of Nexus Dynamics. The man my brother spent his entire professional life trying to impress. Corbin practically leaped out of his chair, hand outstretched, his face suddenly transformed into a mask of fawning sycophancy. "Mr. Croft." "Sir. What an honor. I'm Corbin Vance, Regional Director of Sales. We met once at the quarterly summit." Sterling shook his hand, his smile polite but reserved. "Of course, Corbin. A pleasure to see you again. Please, sit with us." Corbin insisted, practically shoving another relative out of a chair. For the next 20 minutes, Corbin monopolized Sterling's attention. He boasted about his sales numbers, name-dropped executives, and laughed too loudly at everything Sterling said. He was a peacock spreading his feathers, desperate to be noticed. Through it all, Sterling remained impeccably professional, nodding politely, asking generic questions. But I saw it. Over the top of Corbin's oblivious head, Sterling's eyes met mine for a brief second. There was a flicker of shared amusement, a silent acknowledgement of the charade. He knew exactly who I was. He had to. We had our book club meeting scheduled for the following Tuesday. The champagne flowed freely. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the vineyard, the speeches began. Reese gave a beautiful, heartfelt toast to his new wife and a loving tribute to his father that left not a dry eye in the house. He spoke of strength, integrity, and quiet dignity, and as he did, his eyes found mine. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated connection. Corbin, however, saw it as a challenge. He was on his fourth glass of champagne, and his arrogance was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing the raw insecurity beneath. He needed to reassert his dominance. He needed to remind everyone in his orbit who the winner in the Vance family was. And to do that, he needed a loser. He needed me. He saw his opportunity when Sterling stood up to discreetly make his way towards the exit, likely to get some air. Corbin sprang to his feet. "Mr. Croft." "Sterling." "Leaving so soon?" he called out, his voice too loud. He intercepted Sterling near my end of the table, where I was having a quiet conversation with Thea's parents. He slung a familiar, unwelcome arm around Sterling's shoulders. The gesture was meant to look casual, like they were old friends, but it was a clumsy, desperate power play. Before you go, Corbin slurred slightly, I have to show you something. A real piece of work. He tightened his grip on Sterling and turned him to face me. He pointed, a theatrical, mocking gesture. Look over there. See her? That's my sister, Lenora. Sterling's face remained a polite, neutral mask. She seems like a lovely woman, he said, his tone even. It's a beautiful day for your family. Corbin let out a short, barking laugh. Oh, she's family, all right. She's our designated sob story. He leaned in closer to Sterling, but his voice was a stage whisper meant for everyone nearby to hear. This is my broke failure of a sister. Hasn't worked a real day since her husband died. Lives off his life insurance like a leech. A perfect example of what happens when you have zero ambition. The words hit me. They were not new. I had heard variations of them for 15 years. But hearing them here, on this perfect day, in front of my son, his new wife, and this man who held my brother's fate in his hands, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud crack, but a quiet, tectonic shift. The ghost of Arthur and his plea for peace finally faded. I thought of my husband, a man of immense dignity, and realized he would be horrified. Horrified that I had allowed this man, this petty, cruel man, to dishonor his memory, my life, and our son's happiness for so long. The peace I had been keeping wasn't peace at all. It was rot. I stopped breathing for a second. The world narrowed to a single point. I looked past my sneering brother and met Sterling Croft's eyes. My expression was not pleading. It was not hurt. It was cold, clear, and commanding. It was the look of a queen giving an order. And my eyes said one thing, end it. Sterling, a man who understood power in all its forms, understood the signal perfectly. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The polite mask dropped from his face, replaced by the cool, lethal authority of a CEO. He gently, but firmly, removed Corbin's hand from his suit jacket. The game was over. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate and absolute. The cheerful buzz of conversation around our table died. Everyone could sense the change. Sterling Croft stood a little straighter, his friendly demeanor gone, replaced by an aura of pure, undiluted power. His voice, when he spoke, was dangerously quiet, a tone that commanded more attention than a shout ever could. What did you just call her, Corbin? My brother, still basking in the glow of his own perceived cleverness, didn't register the warning. It's just a little family joke, sir. You know how it is. He chuckled, a nervous, sputtering sound. No, I don't know how it is, Sterling said, his eyes locked on Corbin's. So please, enlighten me. I want to understand the joke. You called your sister, Mrs. Vance, a broke failure. Well, I mean, it's the truth, Corbin stammered, finally sensing the ground shifting beneath his feet. She doesn't do anything. Let me tell you the truth, Corbin, Sterling interrupted, his voice like chipping stone. He didn't raise it, but every word landed with the weight of a hammer blow. 15 years ago, Nexus Dynamics was an idea on a cocktail napkin. We had no money, no office, and no believers. The banks laughed at us. The venture capitalists told us to come back in 5 years. We were weeks away from giving up. He paused, letting the silence stretch, forcing everyone at the table, including my shocked mother, to lean in. Except there was one person who believed, Sterling continued. An anonymous investor who reached out to us. Someone who saw a pattern in the chaos that no one else did, not even me. Someone who wired us their entire life savings based on nothing more than a business plan and a belief in the future. Our first and most important investor. Our angel. We have a code name for them in the company's founding documents, Investor V001. Corbin's face was a mask of confusion. He had no idea where this was going. "Sir, I don't understand." "You're right, you don't," Sterling said. "The life insurance that Lenora Vance has been living on like a leech. That was the seed money for this entire company. The money that paid my salary, and eventually, yours." A collective gasp went through the small audience at our table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Corbin just stared, his jaw slack. Sterling wasn't finished. He took a small step closer to Corbin. "That anonymous investor, V001, who currently owns a 15% stake in a multi-billion-dollar corporation, is Lenora Vance." The words detonated in the quiet hall. Corbin physically recoiled as if he'd been struck. He looked from Sterling's stony face to my calm one, his mind frantically trying to process the impossible. "Her online book club," Sterling went on, his voice relentless. "That's the executive board meeting, Corbin. Her trips to San Francisco. That's when she meets with our top engineers. Every major strategic decision, every acquisition, every significant promotion, goes through her. You don't work for me, Corbin. Ultimately, you work for her." The world had shrunk to the space between the three of us. Corbin's face had drained of all color. He looked like a ghost, haunted by the specter of his own arrogance. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sterling delivered the final, clinical blow. "Your behavior tonight is not a family joke. It is a catastrophic lapse in judgment. It is a display of breathtaking disrespect and unprofessionalism. It tells me everything I need to know about your character, or lack thereof. At Nexus Dynamics, we value integrity and respect above all else. You have shown you possess neither." He looked at his watch. "Pack your desk on Monday. Your security access will be revoked at 9 a.m. You're fired." Corbin finally found his voice, a desperate, croaking whisper. He turned not to Sterling, but to me. "Lenora, please, you can't." His eyes were pleading. For the first time in his life, he was looking at me not with scorn, but with terror. He saw me, finally, as a person with power. And for the first time in 15 years, I spoke my truth to him, not with anger, but with a profound and sorrowful finality. "I spent 15 years honoring a ghost's wish for peace, Corbin," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I let you chip away at me, piece by piece, because I thought it was what he would have wanted. But I was wrong. Peace isn't silence. It's dignity. Something you know nothing about." I held his gaze. "You think I can't do this? You're wrong again. I can. And I have." Just then, our mother, Marin, rushed to my side, her face streaked with tears. She grabbed my arm. "Lenora. How could you?" she cried, her voice thick with disbelief. "How could you do this to your brother? Why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at my mother, at the woman who had watched my public humiliations and offered only pitying smiles. The woman who measured her children's worth in dollars and job titles. My heart broke, not with a loud shatter, but with a quiet, weary sigh. "Because I am your daughter," I said softly. "And I was hoping, just once, that would be enough. I guess I have my answer now." That was the final blow. Corbin didn't say another word. He looked utterly defeated, an empty suit that had just been stripped of its contents. He turned, stumbled slightly, and then walked away, weaving through the happy, oblivious wedding guests and disappearing out the door. He didn't look back. My mother stared after him, sobbing, before my Aunt Bryony and Uncle Gideon, their faces pale with shock and a dawning, horrified understanding, led her away to a quiet corner. They didn't dare look at me. In the sudden vacuum of chaos, my son Reese and his new wife Thea were instantly at my side. Reese wrapped his strong arms around me in a fierce hug. "I am so proud of you, Mom," he whispered into my hair. "Dad would have been, too." Thea took my hand, her grip firm and supportive. In that moment, surrounded by my real family, I felt a profound sense of release. The weight I had been carrying for 15 years, the burden of a dead man's wish, simply evaporated. Sterling Croft approached, his expression now softened with a deep, personal warmth. "Arthur always said you were the strong one," he said quietly, his eyes filled with an old sadness and a new respect. "He told me if anything ever happened to him, my only job was to give you the tools and get out of your way. He knew you'd know what to do." He smiled a genuine, tired smile. "He would be so proud of you today, Lenora." The rest of the wedding passed in a strange, dreamlike state. The music swelled, people danced, and my son and his wife cut their cake. On the surface, it was a perfect celebration. But a fault line had cracked open in our family, and nothing would ever be the same. I didn't feel the savage glee of revenge I might have expected. Instead, there was just a quiet, clean, and cold sense of order being restored. The cancer that had been poisoning us for years had finally been cut out. It was a painful surgery, but a necessary one. I finally drew a line in the sand that had been washed away by my grief for 15 years. I reclaimed my story. But in doing so, I shattered what was left of my family. I know I did what I had to do for my own sanity and for my son. But I lie awake some nights in the quiet of my home, the home I bought with my own success, and I wonder. Aita for letting him build a life on a foundation I knew I could turn to dust with a single word. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with a friend who loves a good revenge tale, and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this one. Your support means the world. See you next time.